The Creative Control of Ishkana podcast is brought to you by you. Virtually all financial support for this show comes from listeners just like you, so please keep Creative Control going by making a flexible monthly donation at patreon.com/Creative Control. You'll be glad you did this. Not as glad as me, but still pretty glad. Thank you. Bruce Cockburn is an iconic folk and rock musician, songwriter, and singer currently based in San Francisco, California. Originally from Ottawa, Ontario, Cockburn is regarded as one of the most outspoken artists of our time and has written deeply personal and poetic songs based on his extensive world travels to war zones and corrupt and impoverished third world countries, not to mention being a fierce and early advocate for ecological causes and climate change awareness. On September 20th, 2019, True North Records will release Crowing Ignites, Cockburn's 34th album and his first collection of all new, unreleased instrumental songs. Ahead of upcoming North American tour dates, including stops at the Hillside Festival in Guelph, Ontario on July 14th and the Edmonton Folk Festival on August 10th, Bruce and I had a conversation about his life and times in Ottawa and Boston, his personal and professional wanderlust, how he got into music and his approach to guitar playing, his new album, Crowing Ignites, future plans, and much more. With the support of listeners like you who subscribe to this podcast and spread the word about it and make flexible monthly donations at patreon.com/Creative Control, plus in-kind support from CFRU 93.3 FM, Pizza Trokadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, and Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton, this is the 484th episode of Creative Control, featuring the legendary Bruce Cockburn, with your host, me, Vish Khanna. Hi, Bruce. How's it going?
It's going very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm well. Where in the world are you?
I'm in Beverly, Massachusetts, which is a suburb of Boston, more or less. It's just across the river from Salem, Massachusetts.
Oh,
famous for its witch trials of old.
Yes, that's true. Is it a creepy feeling? Is it creepy and weird being near the Salem witch trial?
No, not exactly. I just had a really good lunch, but it made a meatloaf, and I suppose the meatloaf could have been made out of something creepy, but I don't know that. But as it stands, the creepiest thing is trying to find my way from the front of the theater to where the tour bus is, which on these streets is kind of peculiar.
Yeah, but, just be careful, Bruce. I don't want you getting hurt during our interview. That would be.
I don't think I'll get hurt. But I may be lost for a long time.
Oh, I've been lost a long time myself, and I'm stationary right now. Don't worry about that. Now, you actually...
Some people would say I've been lost the whole time.
You actually spent a significant and formative period of your life in Massachusetts, did you not?
Yeah, I spent a couple of years going to Berkeley in Boston, Berkeley School of Music.
Right, but it wasn't the best experience in some ways, right?
Well, it mostly wasn't the best experience because of the age I was and the stuff you go through when you're at the end of your teens. But Boston was okay to be in. Berkeley was a good school, but I don't know. It was a lonely time and kind of, I knew some peculiar people, that some of whom were interesting and some of whom were kind of not so nice. But it was a really educational time on all fronts. Again, partly because of where I was at in my life, but because the school was teaching me stuff that didn't at the time seem like it would be useful, but has had a long-lasting effect. Was good. And
yeah, you went to the Berklee College of Music. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, And if I'd stayed till I graduated, I would have had a Bachelor of Music degree and been qualified to teach music in high school. But the rule of thumb, or the mythology, was that if you were any good, you wouldn't graduate anyway because somebody would hire you. In my case, that wasn't what happened. I just dropped out because I realized that it wasn't for me. But anyway, meantime, I was studying composition and playing in a jug band on the side and getting to hear a lot of all kinds of different music. So it was good, actually.
Yeah, you had some access to some cool folk clubs and stuff like that, and you were at an impressionable age. And I mean, my sense of you from reading your memoir, which is called Rumors of Glory, for those who haven't read it yet, and I watched this documentary about you called Pacing the Cage, and my sense of you is that you are, for some reason, you have been imbued with some kind of wanderlust. You're a traveler, and you had a restlessness as a youth, and I don't mean to psychoanalyze you, but I know that you left Canada and your parents to go to school with some purpose, right? You didn't like school. You didn't like high school. You hated high school.
Yes, I did hate high school. That's true. I mean, like the hate is relative, as is everything else, I guess. It felt like a prison sentence to be in high school. Public school I liked. I mean, I wasn't thrilled with it. It wasn't like I just woke up every morning, die and get to school, but I had a good time in public school, and I learned a lot, and it felt positive. But by the time I hit high school, it wasn't like that.
Well, high school, you got the hormones, you got the puberty, you got, what's next in life? I'm becoming an adult. That's scary.
Yep, all that stuff. And then the things I was good at, language and history and stuff like that. I mean, I had good relationships with the teachers of those subjects, and French, stuff like that. But French, we sort of tortured the French teacher, but with anything to do with math and science, stuff like that I wasn't really well suited for, I didn't do well, and the teachers were miserable, and it was kind of just a humiliating experience all around. So I was glad to get out of there. I didn't want to go to college. My parents were insistent about it, and luckily, I just happened to see in an ad in Downbeat magazine. Well, actually, it wasn't an ad; it was an article about Berkeley in Downbeat magazine, indicating that they were now accredited and could give degrees. And before that, it was just a music school, but suddenly it was a college that was legal, gave real degrees and whatever. So I waved that at my parents, and they were so relieved that there was something that they wouldn't have to fight with me about, that they jumped at that, and so I ended up going to Berkeley. But I dropped out after a couple of years, or a year and a half, really.
Why did you drop out? I'm curious.
Well, because I realized it wasn't for me. It was like I just had this. You mentioned wanderlust, and it's a kind of spiritual wanderlust, I guess, or something. But I understood that I needed to be somewhere else, and there was. It just felt that the situation I was in Boston with all of the things that I was surrounded by was not really going anywhere, or at least not going where I needed to go. And I didn't know where that was. I had no sense of a goal or anything, but I just knew that I had to move on from where I was. And so I did that, and went back to Ottawa and joined a band. But there was then a nebulous period of the second half of the 60s, basically, where you couldn't really tell what was going on from the outside, but I felt like that there was forward motion, and then I ended up kind of becoming me.
Well, I mean, you've chosen travel as a primary vocational attribute. Like you travel, and it started when you were younger, and it sounds like you were rejecting authority a little bit. Generally, you were rejecting your parents. You had to please them by going to school, but you didn't fulfill it. On some level, you seem to have problems maybe with school authority too. People telling you what to do and trapping you in one place, that's not your thing. I mean, it's really nobody's thing, but it really does not seem to be your thing. You need to be moving and in control.
Yeah, well, I've never liked people telling me what to do, that's for sure. And it's not so much in control. I don't know. I'd have to think about that one. I do like to be in control, but I'm not sure it extends as far as you're making it extend, but it might. But really, if traveling was a career, it started in 1970 when I got my first vehicle.
Right.
and my then wife and I drove west, and we got a pickup truck and made it into a camper.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were almost the only camper on the road in 1970. By the mid 70s, there were lots of them, but when we were first doing it, you just run into one or two now and then, and you could stop anywhere. You could camp in the picnic sites along the road. You could just basically park anywhere and camp. That changed once the numbers got up there, and all the various jurisdictions realized that they wanted to control those things. But in the beginning, it was just pure adventure, and that was the appeal. It was like it was exciting to think, wow, I've never really been west.
Well, and
so we're going to get in this vehicle, and we drive, the 1,500 miles of Ontario, and then suddenly be in Manitoba, and where you get out of the trees and the sky opens up, and that was all very exciting.
Well, that trip with Kitty that you're describing across Canada followed a trip you made as a younger guy on, was it like a Russian freighter or something? It was some kind of boat, right?
Well, Kitty and I went to Europe on a Russian ship, but that was a bit later. But that was 73, I think. But
this was after. Okay.
Yeah, I had been to Europe though, and that was actually now that you mentioned that, I guess it really started there. That was between high school and Berkeley.
Yeah.
I went to Europe, and I went on a Norwegian freighter from Montreal to Norway.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay. Yeah.
And then stayed with a Swedish friend in Stockholm for a little while, and then when the two of us hitchhiked down to Paris. So that was an extended summer kind of between high school and Berkeley.
And you say that this is a spiritual calling. Your need to be, where you need to be. Something is driving you to move around and go on these adventures and live the life you're living even to this day.
Yeah, I travel is now less for adventure and more just for getting to gigs.
Yeah,
sure. Because I'm balancing that against having a family that's stationary. I mean, my wife has a job in San Francisco, and I have a daughter in school there, and so. When my daughter's out of school, she can come with me on the road, and does. But I spend less time on the road at a stretch now in order to have a family life that is functional. Because it's as anybody who does this much traveling will tell you, it's very hard to balance those things out. It's if you let the traveling dominate, then you don't have a family life for long.
Well, among the attributes that you're known for and celebrated for, beyond your being a great artist, a great guitarist, great songwriter, people associate you with the strength of your convictions in terms of particular issues. And I know ecologically that's a concern that a lot of us are going through. There's a moment in this documentary I was alluding to, Pacing the Cage, where the interviewer says, "So how are you feeling about the environment?" And you say, "I think we're fucked." It's a very comical comical cutaway. And this documentary came out a few years ago now. How are you feeling about a couple of things here? On some level, we might be more fucked. I
would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On another hand, there are more young people organizing and trying to make their voices heard about this particular issue. So that's some glimmer of hope. Whether it has any efficacy, I don't know, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And then the other thing I want to ask you about is, as a young person, you viewed travel as a rite of passage almost. I need to do this. I need to go out and see the world. But now, as an adult, you must realize the impact you're having as a traveler, your ecological footprint. So, a few questions in one. But can you talk about those? Your perspective on the movement towards fighting climate change, and also your role as an artist in contributing to that, and how you reconcile that?
As an artist, it's my job to tell what I can of my truth as I experience life, basically. That's how I see it. And so I put that stuff in the songs, and it happens that I'm confronted by, as is everyone else, by the degradation of our environment. And it means something to me. It's particularly poignant for me because I grew up with a certain love of nature and that love of nature was enhanced big time with those early travels in the West, the first encounter with the Rockies and all that. And we used to spend a lot of time in that part of the country, and and we watched it deteriorate. We watched the developments happen, and we watched the tourism increase, and the more commercialized, or the increasing commercialization of places like Banff and all that. And I mean, there's all kinds of sides to that picture. So you can't just sort of say, well, that shouldn't have happened. But I think it's safe to say it shouldn't have happened in the way that it did, and to watch it happen that was heartbreaking. And that goes on across the board. The more you see of the world, the more you see that happening, and the more heartbreaking it becomes. So yeah, I mean, that stuff shows up in the songs. Those feelings and the observations that have led to them show up in the songs. And once you've put stuff in a song, then you're invited to discuss it, as we are now. Yeah. And so it becomes a topic that I've gotten associated with because of that. But it matters a lot to me. For me personally, not so much now, because I'm old and I'm not going to be around that much longer. But
don't say that, Bruce. You'll be fine. Everything's fine.
Well, I mean, if nobody messes with me, I might last to 500. But
first of all, have you found the bus? Are you still lost? That's my main concern.
Thank you. I actually found the bus. The navigation spirits took hold, and here I am. Okay. So it was good. But yeah, I think about my two daughters and my grandchildren. The kids that my older daughter has, and what world are they going to grow up into? And it's their problem, and they're going to have to fix it, because my generation has not. I mean, my generation continues to trash it ever more vigorously. And I mean, you get Mike Pompeo is younger than me, right? And that asshole is standing up there saying global warming is good because we're going to be able to get at the Arctic oil more easily. Right. Like, now, how ignorant and short-sighted and death wish filled is that? And this is the thing. I mean, I remember saying this in conversations some years ago, that I felt like humanity was at a point where we were confronted with these conflicting strains in us between the recognition of our interconnectedness and our, there's the need we have to be related to our surroundings and each other, which is real. And then this death wish, this thanatos that we have in us that's just wants to commit suicide and take everything with us as we go. And if you look at the political arena and the economic arena, the big picture there, you see Thanatos winning. You see across the board, the big decisions are being made by people who want us all to die, whether they admit it or not, or recognize it or not. They don't, of course, but that's what it looks like to me.
I mean, you're a Canadian living in America. How long have you been in San Francisco now?
Almost 10 years, about 10 years.
And before that, you were where?
Well, I lived back and forth between Brooklyn and Kingston, Ontario for a year.
Okay.
And then I had the place near Kingston, for a little while before that. But so, this is my second stint living in the U.S. In the 60s, when I lived in Boston, it seemed insane. And that was then. I mean, it still seems insane, and if anything more so. Although it was pretty weird then too, because the Vietnam War was on, and there was all the tensions around that, and we hadn't had Nixon yet. But
I've never heard anyone say that the '60s in America weren't weird. You almost said that. They weren't that weird, but the '60s were kind of weird. Like, we have to admit that.
They weren't as weird as now, thow.
That's probably fair to say. Yeah.
Really, I think this country's in an even more polarized state than it was then.
Well, you referenced Mike Pompeo's comments, and you mentioned your own generation. The brashness and the openness of this generational selfishness of only looking at what we need now and not worrying about your children, my children, the generations to come. As a Canadian living in America and sort of seeing what that country is going through firsthand, like, what are your thoughts on it? I mean, you say it's terrible, but as an active member of your community even, are you able to affect change? Do you feel like you have a voice there?
Well, I don't. I'm not a citizen here, so I don't get to vote. I do have a voice. I mean, people, I have an audience that listens to what I have to say.
Yeah.
But most of them are already in agreement with what I have to say, and that's why they're my audience.
Yeah.
But we all live in these echo chambers, and I mean, I think what's happening in the States is, well, the word I was going to use is contagious, but that perhaps isn't exactly right. I think it's a global phenomenon that is being expressed as perhaps more vividly in the States than we can see it elsewhere. But I mean, this whole swing toward populism, which is basically a kind of selfishness.
It's a weird code phrase that they've employed, I find. Populism.
Yeah, because you think, I mean, populism. What the word conjures up to me is a someone who cares about the working man, so to speak, quote unquote, right? And that isn't what we've got. We've got people who play that game, and the working folks are duped, or appear to be, by that, but into supporting them.
Yeah, that brashness that I'm talking about. Yeah,
friend.
Yeah, they're lying. They're just openly lying all the time. The open dishonesty is just mind-boggling.
And it's probably kind of foolish to say that it's the first time in the world it's been like this, but it might be the first time that it is the first time since very ancient prehistoric times that there's been a global culture.
Right.
And that global culture communicates with itself and feeds itself, and when one part of it becomes infected with something, it all does. So this is the age of the internet and globalization and everything, and that's all part of that picture. So whether it's emanating from a particular place like the U.S. or whether it's just a worldwide thing that's happening, we're all going to be affected by it, and we all are being affected by it. And Canada's not free of that either, as we can see looking at the politics currently.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's we're at a difficult time, and people have to make very hard decisions now if we're going to survive, because the easy decisions weren't made when they could have been. Well, maybe they were never easy, but they might have been easier had they been made sooner. But we've let that go by, and so now we're faced with the either ors. Either we have tar sands, or we have whatever the lack of tar sands produces in Alberta. Right. I mean, whatever that is. I mean, people will tell you all kinds of different things, but you're not going to have a healthy climate. You're not going to have a healthy economy even down the road by exploiting the tar sands now. But as you said, it's the short-term gain that everybody's looking at. So, not everybody, as you also said. Like there is a hopeful point there.
Yeah.
Where there are all these young people, and they're not all young. I mean, there are lots of people in my generation that feel like I do about these things, and that are far more effective in their actions probably than I am about this, and it's the reason it hasn't ever disappeared completely off the table. There's a lot of people that have been working on this since it first became apparent in the middle of the 20th century that this is where it was going. So if the young people can take up that torch and make something out of it, then we do have a chance. Yeah,
no, I'm with you on that. I agree with you. I appreciate your response to that, by the way. And I always have appreciated your outspokenness. I mean, it's a frustrating thing. I feel like you allude to this in your book, or maybe it's the documentary where you kind of say something along the lines of, I'm glad people are finally listening to things that we were talking about 20, 30 years ago. It might be too late, but at least they're listening now, which is interesting in itself. But one of the things you talk about in your book is as your music began to get more political, or, you're a real artist, you oscillate, you change constantly, and you lose audience members because of this, for whatever reason. And as a working musician, I wonder about that. Is that anxiety-inducing to know that your entire career and livelihood is based on the whims of your followers, your fans?
It didn't come as a surprise, and it's not really bothersome.
It doesn't bother you. You're used to it.
It's a factor in my ability to make a living, but I've been blessed with the fact that whenever there has been that drop-off in an audience, there have been other people come into the picture that are interested. So, it's always worked.
It's working
But
itself out.
so I mean, I have a certain luxury that way. I don't think that's a given. I think that I'm grateful for that because it's not something you take for granted. But it's been the case for me. But I've also had a very capable manager in the form of Bernie Finkelstein for 50 years now, who's been able to navigate through all that stuff on my behalf, and so those things are a great gift. But yeah, I mean, people come and go. You can't. Of course, you want everybody to love you. I mean, that's why we step out in front of the public, because we want everybody to give us a big hug.
Yeah.
But it isn't going to be like that. And if you were under any illusions about that, you get that kicked out of you very quickly. The first time somebody says, "Oh, who's that asshole?" It's just that there's a great. This is, I think, did I put this in the book? I can't remember, but at one point, now whenever I try to think of names, it goes away. The guy, the Al, whatever his name is, who did The Year of the Cat. English artist.
Oh yeah, who is that? I'm blanking on it too.
I mean, I haven't seen him for years and years, but I knew the guy.
That's not. No, it's who am I thinking of? I don't want to. It's not Al Purdy. That's not who you're talking about.
That's an American. That's a Canadian poet, Al Purdy, and then there's Al Green, the R&B singer, and there's Al
Stewart. Al Stewart.
Al Stewart. Yes.
There you go.
Good.
Yeah.
So thank you, Al Stewart. So Al Stewart and I were doing a gig together at the Yellow Door in Montreal, and or was it the Yellow Door or the Back Door? There were two door clubs that were owned by the same people. But anyway, in one of those clubs, we were sharing a bill one night, and I think he went on first. I don't remember, but this was before he'd had any big hits or anything. He was just an interesting singer-songwriter that was touring. So he did his set, and then I did my set, and then we went to a deli after to get some food, and there was a bunch of us that went, and Al and I are there, and we had a nice time eating, and we're standing on the sidewalk kind of saying goodnight afterwards, and a guy who'd had a couple of beers comes up to us, and he recognized Al Stewart, and he said, "Oh, I saw your show tonight. You were really great. That was really entertaining, and you were terrific." And he said, then he paused, and he said, "But that other fairy." And I'm standing right there behind him. I just started laughing my head off, and we all looked at each other, started laughing, and the poor guy didn't recognize me because I don't know why. I mean, I don't think I looked that much different, but he didn't, and he had no idea what prompted all this laughter, but it was a really funny moment, but indicative of what we were just talking about, that you learn quickly not to expect everybody to love you, even though you wish they did. So, well,
I mean, you were particularly successful in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, but I wonder about your relationship with modern music. Do you listen to lots of music? Does it still, because you're also renowned for, as I said earlier, kind of switching your sounds up. You're a very open listener. You incorporate lots of different musical styles into your own work. Are you still kind of actively listening to music, and does that inform what you're doing?
Well, my two sources of music that are the most consistent sources are a friend that I have coffee with sometimes in the mornings who sends me YouTube links to all kinds of classical stuff that I wasn't aware of. There's sort of a period, so-called classical, but it started because we had a conversation where I was saying, I really liked it up until the Baroque period, and then after 1900. I like the stuff that's happened after 1900. That music I can get into, but all that stuff that happened in between, Mozart and the Romantic period and all that stuff, I'm not there. It leaves me cold. I don't know anything about it.
Uh-huh.
So he started sending me links to great performances of some of these great pieces, and it's been very educational. So I listened to those things. Lately, he's been finding great vocal performances, choral things and stuff. So it's kind of mind expanding in a way. That I've become, and the other consistent source is my young daughter, who's in second grade and who's a big fan of Jojo Siwa, and the sort of girl pop stuff that's around, right?
Okay.
So I hear that, and I mean, some of it's great.
Yeah.
Some of it's, yeah, but like for a while, I was quite in love with that song Havana.
Yeah, my son
Which
likes that song a lot.
is a great record.
Yeah.
It's just a really great record, and you know, it's been a long time since I paid any attention to what was on the radio, but I guess in the '80s I sort of paid attention to what was on the radio, and that's kind of the only time.
Really?
But because it
why is
started
that?
to fall apart after. Well, because radio got good. It was first there was in the '70s there was freeform FM, which was interesting because you just never knew what was going to come up. But generally, how interesting it was depended on the individual on-air person, and they would pick what they played, and you know, if you found someone you liked, whose taste you agreed with, then you could have a great time listening to the radio. But otherwise, you might be inundated with stuff that wasn't that interesting. But in the first half of the '70s, I avoided radio because I didn't want to sound like anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be kind of influenced by other people who do anything like what I do. So I was listening to Renaissance music and ethnic music from all over the place, that sort of thing. And then I caught up. I discovered Bob Marley and David Bowie and the Sex Pistols, and I got excited about all of that stuff, and that lasted through the '80s, and through the early '90s when there was AAA radio in the States that was also interesting and played a lot of a variety of non-formulaic music.
Yeah.
But then that fell apart after a while. It all got bought up and turned into more commercial things, or what were perceived to be more profit-making things, and it just got less interesting. And so, and then what had been kind of mainstream radio became all talk radio, which is mostly. It would be nice if it were more boring. It's mostly just really irritating. So,
yeah,
these horrendous people pontificating about this and that. But that said, I mean, San Francisco is blessed with a bunch of pretty good radio stations. I listen to. There's a black-owned radio station that plays a lot of jazz, a lot of really great jazz, and a lot of old R&B and stuff that's good, stuff that's got a sense of adventure in it. And there's a classical station that tends to be a little bit predictable, but sometimes they play some pretty good stuff too. And it's a better than average radio scene for the listener in that city than most other places I've been. But it's still, what comes home is the stuff my daughter likes and the stuff my friend sends me.
Okay, you're not necessarily actively buying your own music or listening to your own music. It comes to
that's a very long way of saying, yeah, that's right.
Well, I was listening to your latest album is Bone on Bone, as far as I know. Is that correct?
Well, we just finished the new one, but yes, that's the last one that came out. Yeah.
Right, the last one that's been released. We can get to that unreleased or up forthcoming one in a moment. But one of the moments that strikes me the most is the title track. It's Unless My Speakers Are Broken, I believe it's an instrumental, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so I'm curious about your relationship with the guitar after all these years. The guitar as a kind of cultural touchstone is in an interesting place right now. I actually feel like maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, it felt like the popularity of the guitar as an instrument was maybe even on the decline. People were reporting that. Now I'm starting to hear it and see it more and more in more synthesized music and in realms that maybe it wasn't always there, hip hop, R&B. It's really making a comeback. But you're renowned as a great guitar player. Does the instrument still surprise you? Are you still learning things about it?
Yes, and I'm still challenged constantly by things. In fact, in some ways more challenged because as I get older, it's harder to make the hands go. So I'm getting away with it so far, but I can see a day coming when it's going to become. When the balance will tip the other way. But right now, I mean, I'm still doing the stuff I need to do. But there's just always more. The album. Well, you wanted to wait a few minutes to talk about it, but I'll just say that the album we just finished.
Yeah, go ahead.
is an instrumental album, which is all guitar basically, and I think it came out really well. So, other people will be able to judge for themselves that. whether that's true, but I think so. And so it continues. But that's what got me into music in the first place. I mean, I didn't start out as a teenager wanting to be a songwriter. I wanted to play guitar, and I got interested in composition kind of through the guitar and through listening to jazz and imagining that I would be a jazz guitarist someday and be a composer of music for large jazz ensembles, which is what I went to school to study.
Right.
And then it turned out, okay, I realized this isn't where it's supposed to go. But my interest in music started with the guitar, and it's always been pretty central.
Well, it's fascinating to me that you've made an instrumental record, that the one you're describing. Just because you strike me as someone who always has a lot to say, how do you make that decision to ostensibly shut up and and just play some music? I mean, that must be. Does that speak to a lack of something to say, or is it just a different route? Different route.
It might. Well, I mean, it is a fact. I don't know that it's exactly material, but it is a fact that at this point in my life, I've said a lot of stuff already.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I have to say is still the same thing. So there's no point in kind of just saying it over and over and over. So it's harder to think of new things to say or new ways to say the old things than it used to be because of how much I've already done.
Yeah.
That's a fact. But in terms of the decision to make an instrumental album, it wasn't like that. We put out an instrumental album a few years ago called Speechless that was a compilation of previously released pieces with a few new ones on it.
Mm-hmm.
And the original intention with the new album was to do that again, basically a Speechless Volume 2 that would have had a bunch of pieces that have been recorded since Speechless came out and then some new pieces. But we ended up with so much new pieces that it became a whole new album. And, I just got all this music for some reason because I was working on that and thinking about it that way. So, and it is also a fact, I suppose, that I didn't come up with any songs in that same period. Otherwise, the temptation might have been to put off the instrumental thing and try to go for more songs, but for an album of songs. But it just seemed Bone on Bone worked out very well, and I was happy with the songs I got for that. And I don't feel in a hurry to have to repeat that.
Yeah.
So it seemed like a good time to do this.
So you I don't know if you're using the royal we, but who's involved in making this new instrumental album? Is it just you on guitar, or who's involved?
It's mostly me. When I'm saying we, it's the decision makings are mostly me and Bernie Finkelstein. But Colin Linden produced the new album, and he plays on several of the pieces.
Okay.
And we have one other guy. There's a guy named Bo Carper that I know in San Francisco who's a really great guitar player, but also a great shaker player, and he plays shakers on a couple of things. Colin's wife, Janice Powers, plays some keyboards on it, but it's mostly a guitar record.
Okay. Well, can you give us a sense of what is it an acoustic guitar record?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's...
Yeah, there's one piece with electric guitar, but actually a piece that was actually recorded for Bone on Bone and didn't make it on that album for various reasons. But it's a band piece with Ron Miles playing trumpet as was featured on Bone on Bone. But with the exception of that piece, then everything is acoustic instruments built up. Two of the pieces were kind of built up in the studio, improvised pieces layered with different things in the studio, and the rest of them were pieces that I composed ahead of time.
Well, that sounds great. Does the album have a name yet?
Yes, it's called Crowing Ignites.
Crowing Ignites. What inspired that title?
Well, here's a story. There's long ago in the days when the Cockburn clan had a clan chief, which hasn't been for a long time, like not since the 1600s or so.
Oh, I see.
But sometime before that, a clan chief came up with a family motto, which was in Latin, it's Accendit Cantu. And that gets translated, I'd seen this, here and there. The family crest is, or the coat of arms has the most common version of it has 3 red roosters on a white shield. but there's a badge that goes with that the lesser beings who weren't entitled to wear or to flaunt the coat of arms could wear, and that's pictures a crowing rooster, and with this motto Attended Cantu, and Attended Cantu gets translated in various ways. I've seen it as music excites, or which I thought that was the first one. I thought, wow, how ironic and how kind of cool is that?
Yeah.
A family motto for me that says music excites, but and then or he excites by crowing. But then I look at these and having studied a little Latin in high school, it didn't add up. So I actually translated it myself. I mean, it's only 2 words, but I looked up the 2 words in Latin, in the dictionary, and what it actually says is crowing ignites.
That's really cool. That's a cool title.
Yeah, and my wife said, "Oh, you got to use that for an album title." So I did.
Okay. Well, that sounds exciting. When will we hear this record? When will it be out?
It's due to come out in September.
Okay. All right. And then I presume you tour behind it?
We've got a bunch of stuff planned for the fall, and so yeah.
Okay. As we're speaking, you're going to be playing the Hillside Festival in Guelph. What's the mode for that show? Will you be playing songs from this new record? Are you going to have a band? What's the deal? Do you know?
I'm going to have a band, and I'm actually excited about that because it's the same band that I was touring with with Bone on Bone, and we haven't played together for a while, and I'm very much looking forward to getting back together for these summer shows. So it'll be that, and I don't know yet what the repertoire is going to be. There's at least one piece from Crowing Ignites that I want to do with the band. But we haven't started rehearsing anything yet, so I don't really know what's going to take shape.
Too early to say.
Yeah, but but it's going to be great, though.
Safe to say, we know that. That part is irrefutable. Okay, is there? Where would you direct people? I don't know if you're on social media much yourself, Bruce, but where would you direct people who are listening online? Where can they go to learn more about you?
Well, I'm not on social media at all. I have nothing to do with it.
Okay.
Other than to listen to the YouTube things that my friend sends me. But I mean, there's BruceCockburn.com. There's BruceCockburn.org, which is a fan-based website, and there's the Cockburn Project, which is another fan-based website. All of those are sources of kind of legitimate information, and then there's just a bunch of other stuff out there that I don't really know. Bernie has a Facebook presence on my behalf, so I think if you look for me on Facebook, you'll get this sort of a page, I guess, is that what it's called, that
that's right.
Bernie runs.
You and Bernie
I've never been on Facebook, so I don't know I don't know anything about it. But
you're better off. You're better off, Bruce.
So that's my impression. I mean, at first it was just because it seemed like too much trouble, but now I'm kind of glad.
I think you, like a lot of things in your life, I think you were kind of prescient about not wanting to be a part of this thing. You and Bernie are pretty much brothers at this point, aren't you?
In a way, for sure. I mean, my relationship with him is the longest lasting one of my life, other than with my immediate family.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Yeah.
So the new record will be out on True North, I assume?
Yes, it is coming out on True North. Yeah.
I assume correctly.
It's good to put it. Yeah, I mean, it's a rash assumption in a way these days because record companies are kind of a dying breed, and the idea that anybody would have a deal with a record company that isn't Britney Spears or somebody would, or Taylor Swift. I mean, that is not a given at all.
Yeah.
It's hard to get record deals now. So
it
was really great that True North came through with the help that we needed for this album.
Well, I normally end these conversations with people by asking them to select a song for us to go out on from their catalog. Usually it's an artist, and myself talking about a new record. As your new record isn't quite out yet, I don't know if that's possible, but is there a song that you would, from your catalog, that you would select for us to go out on?
Yes, there is, as a matter of fact, and it just popped right into mind as soon as you raised the issue. It's an old one, like a really old one, and I'm not exactly sure if I can even name which album it's on, but a song called "When the Sun Goes Nova," that I think is a perfect one for now.
Why did that come to mind?
Well, I've been singing it the last couple of nights because it came to mind, and it came to mind because, well, because my young daughter, forces me to listen to my old music because she wants to hear it, and so I was kind of reminded of the song because of that, and then it just seemed pertinent to the times we're in, so that.
Well, I didn't mean to interrogate you. Don't feel that was a good answer. Don't feel bad. You sounded sheepish at the end that you didn't do a good job. I think you did a great job.
Thank you.
From 1973.
I've made a profession out of sounding sheepish.
It's true. Maybe you have. That might be something you've excelled in somehow. From 1973's Night Vision, this is When the Sun Goes Nova by Bruce Cockburn. Bruce, this was a true thrill and an honor to get to speak with you. I hope you enjoyed it, and I wish you the best of luck with everything going forward.
I very much enjoyed our conversation. Thanks, Fish.
When the sun goes nova and the world turns over, I don't want to be alone, so honey, come on home. If you in a valley, when the dam breaks, pally, you is going to feel alone, so honey, come on home. If you're on the bum, the policeman come. If you lose your grip or your trousers rip, I'll be waiting, dear. If you're on the bum and the policeman come, if you lose your grip or your trousers rip, I'll be waiting, dear. When the sun goes nova and the wild time's over, I don't want to be alone. So honey, come on home. Honey, won't you come on home? 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 Honey, won't you come on home?
Very special thanks again to Bruce Cockburn for being on this, the 484th episode of Creative Control, which is part of the Entertainment One podcast network and is available on all iOS and Android platforms and Spotify and YouTube and Audio Boom as well. If you want to learn more about me and sign up for my regularly scheduled newsletter, please visit my website, vishkhanna.com. You can like Creative Control on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at vishcreative, or follow me directly at vishkhanna. You can also listen to a radio show version of Creative Control on Wednesdays at noon Eastern Standard Time around the world at CFRU.ca or on an actual radio at 93.3 FM if you're in or near Guelph. Also, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control to make a flexible monthly donation to keep this podcast going. It means the world that you do that, so please do. If you haven't yet made your monthly flexible donation, please consider doing so. Thanks again to Pizza Trokadero, The Bookshelf, Planet Bean Coffee, and Grandad's Donuts for their in-kind support for this show. Always thanks to my friend Jim Guthrie for letting me use a song of his to end the show each week. You can learn more about him at jimguthrie.org. And thank you very much for listening to this episode with Bruce Cockburn and subscribing to this podcast and maybe checking out some of the 483 other episodes that are out there. And that's all I got for now. I will talk to you very soon. Bye for now.